So the next speaker I'd like to bring up, Baya, is going to talk about the art of connection. She's trained in neuro-linguistic programming, emotional intelligence, positive psychology, and a whole host of other very impressive sounding studies. She was host of The Art of Connection. She started The Real World with MTV. And what I love about it is near and dear to a venture capitalist's heart, which is success in venture capital is driven by the size of your network. And her underlying principle here is the quality of your life is driven by your relationships and your networks. So with that, I'd like to bring you up.
Oh, appreciate it. Okay, hi. So I'm going to talk about the art of connection. And really what I want to talk about is connection and loneliness, because we have more people living on the planet than ever before. And we're supposedly more connected than we've ever been, yet we're the loneliest we've ever been. And loneliness isn't just reserved for the physically alone and the socially isolated, it's for the overworked, it's for the stressed, it's for entrepreneurs. And now more than ever, we're living alone. We're spending more time online and less time making meaningful in-person connections, which at the end of the day is what we all crave the most. I love this quote by Brené Brown. She says, "Connection is why we're here. We're hardwired to connect with others. It's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives, and without it, there is suffering." So today I want to offer a solution that can help bring us more connection and can help hopefully cure the epidemic of loneliness. So when I was 5 years old, my parents moved our family from rural Pennsylvania, where we were living on a farm and I was playing with kittens and like running around naked finger painting in the forest, to conservative Salt Lake City, Utah. So to say that it was a culture shock is like a disgusting understatement. And I had a really hard time fitting in, and I was super lonely growing up. So at some point, I just made the decision when I was an adolescent that in order to not feel lonely, I knew what I had to do. I would just become popular, because somehow that was going to make me not lonely and more connected. And I used this thought process throughout my teens. The problem was the more I wanted to be popular, the more it fueled my need for attention and approval. And when I was 20 years old, auditions for MTV's reality show, The Real World, came into town. And for a girl who was starving for attention and approval, this was my ticket. So for some of us, when we think about reality TV, we don't really have that strong of a reaction. Never really watched it, don't quite get what all the fuss is about. But for most of us, when we think about reality TV, we actually do have a pretty strong reaction, and we generally fall into one of two camps. The first camp is like, you literally could not pay me enough to go onto a reality TV show. In fact, reality TV is everything that is wrong with our society today. And then the second camp is like, go on a reality TV show? Honey, I should have my own reality TV show. I would be the next Snooki for sure. But with a history like mine, I will give you one guess which camp I fell into. And at 21 years old, I moved to Brooklyn as part of 7 strangers picked to live in a house. But the real world didn't bring me connection like I thought it would. In fact, if anything, I was lonelier than I had ever been during those 15 minutes of fame when I was arguably the most popular I had ever been. But being on the show propelled me into the work I do today, studying connection. And I put my work out into the world in a few different ways. So sometimes I speak, I produce events, I'm an executive dating and relationship coach, and I host a show called The Art of Connection. And because I put my work out in so many different arenas, I am always talking to people of different races and ages and genders and income levels. And what I have found is the common denominator for everybody who has combated loneliness and who feels truly connected is something that I call an anchor of connection. So what they've created is an anchor of connection. How I define this is having intentional shared experiences on a regular basis with people who you care about. So one of the most powerful ways to have an anchor of connection is through ritual. And I know when we think of ritual, we generally think of religion or sacred ceremony. But today I actually want to redefine ritual as something that's not necessarily religious or sacred, but instead something that we're doing on a repeated and recurring basis. So ritual is repeated action plus intention. When we combine repeated action and intention, ritual becomes ingrained in us just like habits do. The other way to make sure an anchor actually sticks is by keeping it simple, because I have a feeling that most of you have really complex issues that you're already trying to solve, probably both personally and professionally. And if we were going to put something on the table for you to do today and it was complex, it probably just wouldn't happen. So keep it simple. So for instance, my friend, he's a CEO and he travels all over the world for work. But he has a family, and for a while there, his whole family was feeling really disconnected. So when he came to me and I was talking about this anchor of connection, we decided that something he could do was, after he came home from his trips, the morning after, he would cook his whole family breakfast. And they would sit down and they would just reconnect. So on its own, that might not sound like that big of a deal, and it may not do much. But he ritualized this as his anchor of connection. He did it on a repeated basis every single time he came back from a work trip. And now he talks about his family being the most connected that they've ever been, which is really cool. So my partner and I, we have a ritual that we do where every night before bed, we say, "The thing I love about you most today is," and then we'll each say something really kind about one another. Easy enough to do when we're feeling in love. Not that easy to do when we're in a fight. In fact, when we first started doing this, and we've been doing this for about a year now, and we were in a fight and I was angry, it would look more like this. "Hey, Baya, would you want to do the thing I love about you?" I'm really not in the mood. "Okay, would you maybe want to do it now?" "Okay. The thing I love about you most today is how your eyes sparkle when you're wrong and I'm right." But it's interesting, though, because this ritual has actually expanded my capacity for kindness and compassion. And now, when we're in a fight and I'm angry, sometimes I even go first to say the thing I love about him most. But moving on to business, I'm guessing that almost everybody, if not every single one of us here, have been to quite a few networking events. And I'm just going to throw it out there. I hate networking events. I think that most networking events really suck. And not because I don't like networking. I think the idea of building relationships and business relationships, it's super important. But generally speaking, the framework of networking events is like super lame. So I, a few years ago, decided I wanted to create a networking event, but flip it on its head. So I added 2 X factors. I hosted a networking event, except you didn't know anybody who was going to be there. And you didn't even know what the event was until you walked in the doors. So I call this event Secret SLC. And because I produce events all over, and I love the bells and whistles and surprise and delight, these events have looked like a lot of different things. So I've had the FBI come and teach a group of people how to lie detect. I've had the circus perform for a white party in an alleyway, and I've had the Utah Opera perform in front of a private group of 30 people, among a ton of other things. So these events started gaining a lot of momentum inside and outside of Salt Lake City, and I started having executives approach me to do the event for their teams or their clients or their employees. And what we found was that hosting a shared experience shows an increase in client retention, employee satisfaction, and in business growth. And it wasn't because of the bells and whistles. In fact, it was just because people were walking in on the same playing ground and sharing a shared experience, which is super interesting and does not need to be as complex as hosting the FBI at your event. But obviously we're not doing networking events every day, so I wanted to think about things that we do on a day-to-day basis that could be helpful to have an anchor of connection. So recently, some girlfriends of mine and I took a trip to France. And what we found was that in France, meals are rituals. So dinners, for instance, they start later and they last longer. And whether it's 2 people or 10 people, you sit down and you experience the meal for at least 2 hours, and usually 3. The food takes a long time, nobody has their phones out. And when the meal is over, you sit and you talk some more. Day after day, the French go back to the table for their ritualized anchor of connection. So my core desire to be liked and approved of, it might never go away, just like your core desires might not either. But what I know now that I didn't know when I was 20 years old, praying that the real world was my answer to loneliness and my ticket to connection, is that connection isn't created by the things we go get. Connection is created by the things we go back to. So my invitation to you today is simple. Don't do something new. Find something that you're already doing. Do it during the good days, do it during the mundane. So when inevitable emotional storms hit, when you're overworked, when you're stressed, when you're feeling particularly alone, you have your ritual to go back to. You have your very own anchor of connection. Thank you so much. It's super fun to be here with you, and I would love to connect. Thank you. Just so you know, I love hearing about your stories. So if you do take this on and do some rituals, please shoot me an email and just let me know what that ritual was. I love this stuff and I think it's super important, and I would love to hear your stories. So thank you so much.
So I love the observation that we've never been more connected, and yet we've never been more lonely. And the takeaway in terms of the power of rituals to anchor on connection and how critical it is not to go into our own kind of army of one, but to reach out and have shared experiences with others. That's what it's all about. We're on this journey together. So thank you. It was a wonderful talk.